Good morning and welcome to the Melbourne Business Network's webinar with Wendy Parker, who will share with us her insights and expertise on how to position yourself as a thought leader. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items. So my name is Wendy Dawson and I'm the president of the Melbourne Business Network, and you have Libby Dale, who's our vice president. She's the technical genius behind all of this. I can see that Anita Botel, our executive officer, is online as well, and I know a couple other were going to log in, but they're not quite there yet. But the Melbourne Business Network, well, we're a not-for-profit business networking association which has been operating since 1994. Our focus is to facilitate connections, communications, and collaboration with businesses across the municipality of Melbourne through face-to-face networking activities and our B3000 Awards program. Yeah, you heard me say face-to-face. So just like you, we've had to look at the way we do our business and move online and network in different ways. So it's been great to see that a lot of people have already been popping their LinkedIn URLs into the chat boxes. Please do so, and also take these online conversations offline. Catch up for a virtual coffee, or circumstances allowing a face-to-face cuppa. And we certainly look forward to getting back to our face-to-face events as well. So as we roll through and start with this webinar, you'll notice that all your microphones will be placed on mute, and that's just so that there's no background noise. Although this is also a virtual gathering, we do believe that an official recognition of the traditional owners is as relevant in the opening of a webinar as it is when opening an in-person gathering. And so in the spirit of reconciliation, the Melbourne Business Network acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend the respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. There will no doubt be a lot of questions that come up during Wendy's presentation, but she's asked that you actually just hold all of your questions to the end. You can pop them into the chat box and I'll help collate them and corral them to bring them up at the end of the presentation. But that will just help us kind of get through everything and then be able to have a really robust Q&A session at the end. So, Wendy Parker. Wendy, so let me do the intro, Wendy.
I really just wanted to say hello.
So stand by. So Wendy is the principal at Parker Public Relations and has over 20 years experience in the industry, having worked in senior public affairs positions for major organizations such as Drake International, Medibank Private, and National Bank Australia. Prior to becoming a PR practitioner, she worked as a newspaper journalist in South Africa. And when Wendy immigrated to Australia, she worked as an editor of several nationally based specialist business publications. Since launching Parker Public Relations 15 years ago, Wendy has worked from clients from across the country, drawing on her extensive experience as a strategic planner, publicist, and thought specialist. And without further ado, now it's time for Wendy Parker.
Hi guys, welcome to today. I'm really grateful that you've come along. Part of my presentation will include a PowerPoint presentation. I promise it won't be death by PowerPoint, but it'll certainly fill a lot of gaps. So you'll be hearing as well as seeing what I have to say. So I'm actually about to share my PowerPoint with you. So bear with me. There we are. Okay, everyone, welcome to how to position yourself as an authority or thought leader. Oops. Sorry. Apologies. Okay, let's get into it. Authority or thought leader. Are they just kind of the same names for really, or different names for the same thing essentially? And really, which one is best for you? Now, for a start, both have a very deep knowledge of their topic or subject area. But the big differences are that authorities tend to focus on educating and informing their communities to kind of build that trust and credibility, and also naturally drive business. However, thought leaders use their status for other things. Some of them use it to influence, coerce, and persuade. Others to really challenge industry norms and try and change the status quo and the way things are. Others try to move things in different directions and even push innovation and really push those frontiers. Now, in many instances, thought leaders go on to become public icons, while authorities in the main are generally best known to their industries and to their customers and communities. They don't really become public figures. They don't specifically want to become public figures because really at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is drive business in their very specific industry, in their area or their niche. Whereas thought leaders often want to be those icons. So now I'm going to use a few examples of Australian thought leaders to better illustrate what I'm talking about when we come to those differences between authorities and thought leaders. Firstly, we have Colin Ellis. Now, he is a project leadership expert. So he's got deep knowledge in his area and he's written multiple books on project leadership and he speaks and lectures on the topic. But he uses his thought leadership to really educate people and to build trust and credibility and really drive sales for his business. That's his key intent. He doesn't have any higher motivations other than probably build trust and drive business. Similarly, Michael Yardney, he's a founder of a buyer's agent and property management business, the Metropole Group of companies. Again, he's an expert, very specifically in the property investing areas, and he's one of Australia's most published authors. Now, his focus, like Colin Ellis, is simply on building credibility and trust, and he does that by educating and informing his audiences. He has, again, no high ideals or other motivations other than to build trust in order to drive his business. However, when we come to thought leaders, it's another thing entirely. Now, this gentleman is Mike Cannon-Brookes, and he is CEO of Atlassian. Now, he's a public icon, and he uses his status and his thought leadership to coerce and persuade. And rather than, say, focusing on his area of expertise, which is software, he tends to use his thought leadership to enter the public debate and really focus on influencing the discussion around, say, bringing more skilled workers into Australia, turning Australia into a technology powerhouse, and crusading for the renewable energies sector. Now, he doesn't claim to be a renewables expert, and he's actually not a renewables expert, but he acts as a bit of an evangelist for the renewable industry by influencing government and pushing key industry decision making. So he's very different to the authority, where the authority just focuses on their area of expertise. He likes to use his status for other things. Another thought leader is Dr. Bronwyn King. She also has an Order of Australia, and she's actually a radiation oncologist. And she's also an anti-tobacco campaigner who uses her thought leadership to change minds and behavior. Now, several years ago, when she discovered that tobacco companies were the automatic default for her superannuation, she realized this practice had to be challenged, especially her being an oncologist. Now, her efforts have actually resulted in tobacco-free finance policies being implemented by more than 40 Australian super funds and by financial organisations across 10 countries. Okay, the other thought leadership, and probably someone you guys know really well, Dr. Norman Swan. So he's a health expert and he's a well-known broadcaster. And for the Americans and people out there from other countries, he's well known on our broadcaster ABC, which is the public broadcaster. Now, he uses his thought leadership to explain difficult concepts and provide down-to-earth, easy to understand commentary on health-related issues. Now, he really came into his own during the COVID emergency and went on to become one of the most trusted voices on coronavirus. Now, he'd actually, for years, been saying that a pandemic was hit, and no one really took him seriously. However, but when the pandemic did hit in March, and when governments were flip-flopping about what they should and shouldn't do, Dr. Norman Swan was the one who quickly stepped up and urged governments to close schools and to conduct testing and to move faster on encouraging social distancing. And sort of as a result of that, he was the one that most Australians, even Australians that never watched television, they really started watching television because they knew Norman Swan was going to be on at 7:30 on ABC, and he'd be providing some really great advice. So really, he's actually a great example of a thought leader who's used his thought leadership for a specific purpose, and that is demystifying health. Okay, now I'm actually going to put you guys to the test. Now, I know you're all on mute, so I kind of will provide the answer, but this is really to get you thinking a little. Now, this thought leader is using his thought leadership to change minds. He's an Australian sportsman and well-known broadcaster who actually has changed our perception of people with a disability. And he also encourages people with a disability to aim high and reach for the stars. He has a lived experience others don't have. Any guesses? Well, you can't tell me anyway, so I'll let you know. Dylan Orcott. Okay, let me put you to the test again. She is using her status and thought leadership to tackle sexual harassment and abuse in workplaces across Australia. She's developed a 3-part television special on ABC TV, which sought to find answers why we have sexual harassment in the workplace in the first place. So she actually wanted to shine a light on what the problem was in order to find the solution, and what she also wanted to find, particularly being the mother of young daughters. She wanted to ensure that the next generation is not subjected to the same problem that we've had. Any guesses there? Tracy Spicer. Okay, another one. Her thought leadership is about innovation and pushing the big frontiers. So she's trying to establish Australia as a leader in quantum computing. And her physics department at the University of New South Wales is at the forefront of the space race of the computing area. So she's competing with people all over the world. Now, what quantum computers are about are solving problems in minutes rather than thousands of years. Okay, she, as another clue, she won the Order of Australia in 2018, or she was the Australian of the Year in 2018, Professor Michelle Simmons. Okay, she's using her thought leadership to drive innovation, and she's created an online design tool which has effectively brought design to the masses. Now, I'm sure a lot of people from other countries will be familiar with her because she really has taken her design tool. It's very popular overseas. Melanie Perkins from Canva. Okay, he's best known for his global personal finance comparison website. It's called finder.com, and it operates in more than 80 countries, and it reaches about, it receives about 10 million monthly visitors. Now, his thought leadership is focused on educating Australians to make better and more informed financial decisions. Fred Shabesta. Now, I think you guys will all know this one. He's best known for building disruptive businesses, challenging the market and providing smart solutions for consumers. Now, with his latest venture, he's on a mission to identify and nurture innovative thinking. And his thought leadership also focuses on sharing boardroom knowledge with everyday Australians. Now, and like Mike Cannon-Brookes, he's not afraid to enter the public debate and coerce and persuade and challenge people. I'm sure he's a familiar face, Mark Bouris. And finally, he's a demographer who gives business vital insights into societal changes that really impact decision-making for businesses. And he also does it in a way that really captures the public interest. Now, he's predicted major trends such as the baby boomer sea change in property buying and Gen Y expectations of careers and lifestyles. And he's the one who has taken the term smashed avocados round the world. Bernard Salt. Okay, so what do these thought leaders and authorities have in common? Well, for starters, they're really well informed, as I mentioned earlier on, and they've got skills and often a lived experience that other people just don't have. So think of Dr. Norman Swan from earlier on. How could he possibly provide credible advice on health if he wasn't an expert in the area himself? People just wouldn't take him seriously. Now, thought leaders and authorities, they also understand the needs of the industries and their customers and communities, and they're also across their failings and where they're going wrong. But most importantly, they have the solutions to fix these problems. Because really, when you think of it, there's little point in constantly identifying problems if you've no idea what the solution should be. That's what thought leadership is all about, is providing those solutions. And finally, thought leaders and authorities, they tend to be great communicators. And they're always providing their audiences with access to their big ideas, their thinking, and their insights. Let's face it, there's little point in being an authority if you don't and won't share your expertise. Thought leaders are meant to be of service to their communities and provide them with as much help as they can. They're not there to impose barriers. So share and communicate as much as you possibly can. Okay, so the next big question you're going to ask me is, which is best for me? Do keep in mind that thought leadership and being an authority start in the same place. You have to begin by positioning yourself online, by understanding where it is that you provide your expertise. So they have the same starting point, but they do diverge, as we'll get around to discussing later on. Now, if you're a business owner consultant looking to lift your visibility for the very first time, my recommendation is to position yourself as an authority in your field. Don't try to be a thought leader. It's too hard if you don't have that deep expertise. And then later on, as your credibility grows, and if you still have that burning desire to change the world or to really enter the public conversation and to change hearts and minds, then you can actually start your movement or your segue into thought leadership. Until then, stick with what you know best. Okay, so guys, what are the big benefits? Why should I even bother with becoming an authority or thought leader? Does it really matter? Okay, for starters, it's brilliant for business. If you're out there constantly dispensing your advice and your credibility, people trust you. Your credibility grows, and by default, so does the credibility of your organization or your business. People want to do business with experts who know what they're talking about. In fact, so do investors and policymakers and funding bodies and other key decision makers. They want to know that the person or the organization that they're dealing with or lending money to is good at what they do and that they are a sound investment. And finally, being a recognized thought leader or authority also gives you much greater access to the media and to conference organizers. The media, trust me, as I've worked in this area for years and years and years, they're always on the lookout for people who can provide expert commentary for stories and great talent for interviews. And if they see you posting really wonderful stuff online, you would be a prime contender to be invited to appear in the media. And similarly, conference organizers are more likely to invite you to headline a conference or be a speaker if you are already a proven expert. And yes, it is brilliant for your career, that's being an authority or expert, but I'm actually going to get around to dealing with that issue a bit more later on, because it does come up in one of the questions that I have been provided with. So a bit more on that later. Okie doke. The 5 key steps. This is where we really get down to tin tacks. How do you do thought leadership? How do you go about becoming that recognized expert? Where do you get started? I've developed 5 key steps for getting started. Now, these are very much that starting point for a more comprehensive strategy and action plan. But for those who probably are looking at raising their visibility for the first time, this should actually get you thinking and may provide you with a bit of fodder to ask questions later on in the session. So, step one, your goals. Why do you want to be a thought leader authority? What is your objective? It's really important. Are you simply looking to become a credible source of information and a trustworthy source in order to boost your business? Or do you have some more specific motives in mind? Do you, like Mike Cannon-Brookes or Dr. Bronwyn King or Dr. Norman Swan, have other motives or ideas in mind for your thought leadership? Do you maybe want to raise awareness on an issue, something that's a major problem in your industry, and you feel that you are the one to actually rectify that problem by raising awareness? Are you looking at challenging behaviors, bad behaviors in your business, things that are going badly? A lot of people after the various royal commissions have actually used this as an opportunity to go out there and talk about how these behaviors can be changed, provide solutions and better ways of doing things moving forward. And that has actually become the basis of their thought leadership moving forward. Other people like Dylan Alcott actually use their thought leadership for advocacy purposes. If you remember Rose Batty, who was brought to prominence because of family violence, she uses it, her thought leadership, for advocacy purposes. And that's another, way of using your thought leadership. You can also use it to take a stand on key social and political issues and really get involved in that public conversation. Or you can even use your thought leadership to drive best practice. You might have devised a better way of doing things, and this is your opportunity to actually show people how to do it better. And probably by the same token, actually demonstrate your organization as an expert in the field. So bottom line, with your goals, what do you hope to get out of the exercise? Then, so when it comes to goals, I kind of use myself as an example. So I see myself as an authority, not a thought leader. And I use the goal of my authority is to obviously build the credibility of my business, to also boost my personal brand, and to really begin educating my audiences about PR and thought leadership. But I've also got a bit of a thought leadership aspiration, although I never really call myself a thought leader. And that aspiration is to really take a bit of a stand on climate change. And I do it by really pushing the renewables industry. So if I find another thought leader who's a thought leader in renewables industry, I make sure I share the information as much as possible. So I kind of do my little bit, but I never call myself a thought leader in climate change, absolutely not. But I do help the process. Okay, the next one is your niche. Step 2 in position yourself as a thought leader. So this is define your topic niche or your area of expertise. Now, some people often refer to this as your zone of genius. So your niche will inform what you'll be talking and writing about moving forward. So for those of you who own a business or a consultant, it would typically be about the business or the area that you are in, or it could kind of be a subset of that. So for example, I'm in PR and thought leadership, but thought leadership is kind of a newer area for me. So that's an area that I'll talk about mostly. And in time, it's probably the thing that I'll get best known for. Some people who say, for example, are in financial services, they may pick to focus on, say, just talking about self-managed super funds. And so they'll develop their expertise around that subset of their bigger business. Okay, so most of you, if you are running a business or if you are a consultant, you probably pretty much know what you should be, your niche is. But if you're unsure, I'm going to give you a few prompts. Your niche should be something, firstly, that you know a heck of a lot about. Ideally, that you've built your career on, actually even done research on. Having done research on it is fantastic, but I'd say particularly for academics who really are trying to raise their profile for the first time. They can really draw on those years of research, and they've got strong evidence behind them. If you want to define your if you're unsure of your niche, it should certainly be something you qualify to pass opinion on, and it should most definitely be relevant to your target audience. And if you're running a business or consulting, it needs to dovetail with your business. You shouldn't really go off at a tangent and probably talk about something that has nothing to do with your business. Because really at the end of the day, you are trying to boost your business. And if you're an authority, push sales. So really make sure it does dovetail with your business. And make sure that it's something, your niche is something that you're passionate about. Because seriously, there's no point in talking and writing about something that you have no interest in or that you've lost interest in. And finally, another tip. If you're unsure about how to clarify your niche, what are people always asking you for advice on? And if you ever do get invited to conferences, what do people mostly ask you to talk about? And that starts giving you a pretty good idea about what your niche should be. And then the step number 3 is your audience. Firstly, who would benefit most from the information or this very valuable information and education that you can provide? The likely answer is your customers. However, depending on what you're planning to do with your thought leadership or what your business is about, it could also, your audience could also be your industry, it could be your suppliers, your investors, funders, potential financiers, investors, government regulators, and so on. Once you've defined who these people are, make sure you develop a comprehensive list. And then when the time is right, make sure you connect with them online. Or when you finally get around to, say, doing publicity, that you target these people or these publications when it comes to your publicity. Step 4, your communications channels. Where should you be telling your stories? My best piece of advice in this regard is to use the platforms and channels your audiences often go to or are most likely to consume. Now, I've provided a list on the screen. It's not exhaustive, but it kind of does give you a bit of a starting point. And I'm not saying use all those channels. You're better off picking 2 or 3 platforms and doing them really well, rather than picking multiple platforms and executing on them poorly. Also begin the process slowly. Try one platform at a time, and only once you've mastered that, then move on to the next. So remember, building your visibility is about finding out what works for you And don't go and get distracted by the next shiny object and think you have to jump on board. If you find LinkedIn or blogging or publicity is what really works for you, stick to those and just really sort of build up traction around those particular channels. And finally, your content. As a thought leader, what should you be talking and writing about? What story should you be telling? Now, if you want to be taken seriously as a thought leader, my best piece of advice is to stick to your expert niche. Don't go off at a tangent and talk about any and everything. You only confuse your audiences. Stick to what you know best. Stick to what they've got to know you as an expert for. Now, the other piece of advice is always provide your audience with great value. Regardless of what you do, it's about value, value, value. Now, that value could be around alerting them to problems, forecasting what will happen in the future, providing great tips, providing solutions, answering questions, always providing value. And the third big tip is your content must be topical and relevant. What's going on right now? Dip into that conversation. If the conversation is about the post-COVID-19 reconstruction, work out how you can contribute to that conversation in a really meaningful way. Now, where possible, try and include research in what you have to say. This always provides evidence that what you say is grounded in reality and that, you know, it's backed up by really good facts and figures. And finally, be fresh and interesting. And if you're a thought leader, please be opinionated, be thought-provoking, and sometimes be controversial. People love controversy, and if you are positioning yourself as a thought leader, they expect you to be controversial. And most of all, be original. Don't regurgitate what other people are saying. That's not thought leadership. Thought leadership, by definition, is about leading the conversation. Now, often what people do to remain original and fresh is they put themselves into the story and they use their own experiences and they talk about what they've learned and they pass those key learnings onto their audiences. So if you're constantly putting yourself into the conversation, you will find that you do keep it fresh and interesting. So what next is I hear you say. For those who are interested in becoming thought leaders and authorities, here is what you'll need to do. You will need to have a strategy and action plan, no question. Now today, we'll provide you with a really good starting point. After that, you need to develop your personal branding. That's how you appear online. What you say about yourself, the value you provide to people, and who you provide it to, your tone of voice, how you appear online, even things like your images. What is your imagery? That's all part of your personal branding and absolutely vital to your thought leadership. Then the next thing you do is build your online presence. And what I mean by your online presence are things like your website, that's your business website, even your personal website. More and more thought leaders actually often don't have a business website, but they do have a personal website where they might sell their business books or host their podcasts, have their blogs, maybe house their workshops. So that's actually becoming quite popular these days. Your online presence is also about your social media platforms. So if you want to check how strong your online presence is, it's a good idea to key your name to Google and see how often you pop up. That's a good test. The next thing you need to do, and obviously, is connect with those key audiences you've identified and begin sharing and commenting on social media. And when I say share and comment, I mean do it intelligently. Don't just like what others are saying. Provide a comment and try and make sure your comment always positions you as an expert in your area and just keeps on building your authority. And please do not like. It doesn't get you anywhere. So when you've got all these things down pat, then only then you can start creating your original content and you can reach out to the media, start talking at conferences and so on. And then finally, when you do pluck up the courage, you can get started with your business book. But there's no rush with a business book. It's part of the journey, but it's not the beginning of the journey. The beginning of the journey is truly understanding where you can find, where you can provide the greatest value and to who. So remember, becoming the acknowledged authority leader doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't take one blog or one networking event to become that trusted figure in your industry. It takes a while. So be prepared for the long haul and make sure you are consistent and you provide your value and you communicate on a regular basis. So finally, this is the part where you ask your questions. So I don't know, Wendy, if you, and Libby, if you've got any specific questions that people have sent in.
The feedback that's been coming my way, Wendy, has been phenomenal. It's just the wealth of information that you've been able to share in about 40 minutes or so. People have been so appreciative, and I've been hounded in terms of when is this going to be, when is this session going to be circulated? But until we get there, we do have some more specific questions. Now, it might be best if that's the last slide on your presentation, if we stop the screen share, and that way we can actually bring up everybody's images and all of that. But
I was going to say, I do have a final slide where I give people my contact details. So perhaps if we can maybe jump back to that right at the very end.
Sounds good. All righty. So one of the questions that has that's come through, and I think it's because you do highlight that this isn't for the faint-hearted. You actually really need to be passionate about becoming an authoritarian or a thought leader. Yeah. So the first question is, if I don't have deep knowledge in a specific area, does this completely eliminate me from positioning myself as an authority or thought leader?
Great question. My answer, look, it does eliminate you from being a thought leader, but it doesn't eliminate you from becoming authority. You certainly can begin positioning yourself online, especially if you already have a business or a consultancy, or you're planning to start one, because this would kind of almost automatically determine what your niche should be, and typically who your customers are or who your audience is. And you can certainly develop your website and a social media presence, and you can start connecting with your key audiences online. But this is the part where you need to be careful, is how you engage online. And initially, my advice, if you don't have deeper knowledge, is to do it in sort of a bit of a passive way. And it's certainly share information, and particularly share information that other authorities, perhaps even your area, are writing about. These are known authorities. Almost attach yourself to them and share what they say, and perhaps do a little bit of commentary and just say something like, that was a great article because, and then at the same time, what you do is you start developing your deep knowledge in whatever area, designated area you want to build it in. And that comes from reading widely. It's about connecting with authorities in your area and reading what they have to say and sharing this stuff on social media. And it's about constantly staying on top of what's happening in your industry and keeping abreast of emerging trends. And my recommendation is to create maybe a whole lot of Google alerts in specific areas. So they come in every day and you read them and you really start getting very knowledgeable. And then once you've got to a point where you've got that deep knowledge and you've got genuine value to provide your audience, then you can start upping your ante and you can actually start commenting more broadly, writing blog posts, probably going to conference, talking at conferences or even pushing publicity. So I think
you're really reinforcing the fact that, quite frankly, nobody's born with all of this knowledge. It actually starts with an interest and a passion about something, and you read what other people are doing, what are they saying, you're sharing that information, and I think slowly then you start on this journey. And I think the real big thing to reinforce is that now that we've done this session, it doesn't mean by close of business tomorrow that we're all raving authorities or thought leaders. It actually takes time. You got to put in the hard work. There's no easy wins.
And look, even though I say I'm an authority in the area of thought leadership, I'm constantly reading what other people are saying, looking at who the thought leaders are in Australia, what they're doing, how they're using their positions of authority to pass their thought leadership. So I'm always learning. I don't stop, and neither should you.
Great. Now, Claudia has come through with a question. She has asked, do you have any tips on how to get speaking engagements at breakfasts, conferences, etc.?
Well, obviously, the key thing is to make sure that you really are well positioned online in terms of, what your value is, who you provide it to, that your profiles on social media are, well filled out, and that you engage a lot, that you blog a lot about your sort of area and write articles on social media, because and then what you need to do is you need to connect with conference organizers and the people who actually are the ones who reach out to speakers. So make sure you connect with them. And then you can go a little bit further. If you go, oh, look, there's a conference coming up and I really want to speak at that conference on this particular topic. What you start doing is when you write an article on that area, you make sure you tag those conference organizers. So they start becoming aware of what you're talking about. And then you can actually pick up the phone and say, look, you've probably seen what I've had to say. I'd love to speak at your conference. And what's happened is they've probably had weeks or months of seeing and reading what you have to say about your area of expertise. And by the time you pick up the phone, they are pretty much convinced.
Yeah, great. All right. Another good one has come through as well. Is writing a business book the best way to kick off my thought leadership journey?
Look, writing a business book is probably very important to thought leadership. It's not vitally essential. I'll be honest, I've written a lot of ebooks, but I actually haven't written a business book. But yeah, look, they're really good to have, but they're not the starting point. The starting point for your thought leadership is actually going through that 5-step process, which I've just taken you through. And it's about being absolutely clear what your niche is, and understanding where you can provide genuine value and who you can provide that value to. And then my recommendation is to start, before you even think about writing a business book, is to start blogging and writing articles on social media, even doing publicity, to really get comfortable in your space and to get on top of where the big problems and issues are in your industry. And once you're only clear about what those are, and if you can provide a solution, and it's then that you get around to writing your business book, because your book will ideally provide that solution to those big problems out there. So my recommendation is experiment before you do that big ticket item, being writing your business book.
Very good, very good. We've got time for just one last question. The last one that came through was, what is the impact on your career prospects? You know, is thought leadership, is it worth it from a career point of view?
Great question. It's absolutely essential to your career prospects. Being the acknowledged thought leader authority, trust me, makes you much more attractive to employers and headhunters. Companies want to employ people who are well informed and who are problem solvers, who have fresh ideas and who are innovative and inventive. And in fact, in the US, CEO and key leadership positions are increasingly being filled by candidates who are already acknowledged experts or thought leaders. So bottom line, thought leadership does wonders for your career trajectory.
Right. Well, you've certainly shared a lot for us to actually think about and kind of go, all right, what are we going to put into action for our own respective journeys as either an authority or as a thought leader. So thank you so much, Wendy. Now,
it's an absolute pleasure. And I'm just going to do a bit of a plug in my business. And I'll just take you to the next slide. This is if you need more help. I provide coaching and communication services. Now, I always start with that stand-up startup package. That's the strategy, getting you set up online so you are positioning yourself effectively and correctly. And thereafter, I go on and either teach you to manage your own thought leadership, or we can manage the tricky bits that you don't like doing, and then you can kind of focus on the stuff that you really enjoy. Now, ideally, you need to be part of the thought leadership process, and you shouldn't outsource the entire function to someone else like me. I'm happy to be part of it, but you're the authority and thought leader, and really it's important that your voice comes through in what you write and what you say. So now, if you're unsure about whether you qualify or you've got all the right credentials to become an authority or thought leader, I'm providing free 1-hour consultations for the first 3 people to get in touch. Now, here are my details, and that's just a thank you. Here are my details, and you can get in touch with me either by calling me or by emailing me. So remember, it's the first 3 to get in touch. You get free 1-hour consultations. And I'm going to do another quick plug. I've just pulled together a guide to Australia's thought leaders. So you can go to the book section on my website and you can have a free read of my Australian Thought Leaders Guide. And that also kind of gives you a little bit more information of what a thought leader is and who our thought leaders are and why. So go and have a read. It'll give you a bit of extra information.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Wendy.
It's a pleasure.
Now, before we wrap up and go, we too, the Melbourne Business Network, we too have an offer. We at the moment are running a 30% discount on our membership fees, and it's only for a limited time. Anita Botel, our executive officer, is on this hookup, and at the very commencement of this chat, we did put in an email contact, but I will and she's just reached and she's gone into the chat box as well. So you've got her contact details there. So do reach out for that. We do have a number of these events coming up in terms of when our next event is. We actually have our final series on next Wednesday afternoon with the lovely Angela Smith. And she's been taking us on a journey around mental health and well-being. So that is on next Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and it is the signs and symptoms of coping. Sorry, so it's about stress. Sorry, it's about the signs and symptoms of coping with stress. I forgot the important noun in that sentence, didn't I? But the details and the link are down there. Now, also, it's been really good seeing everybody putting in their URLs in the chat boxes. Do be sure to connect with that and copy those down and share those around. In terms of the slides, Wendy, I've also had a question around that in terms of the slides will be available, but if we're making the link available, then you know the slides are certainly in that, so maybe no need to share around your PowerPoint. But we also, if I think about the last little bit, the last question or comment that came through was just once again, thank you so much for sharing some of your thought leadership with us.
It's a pleasure. It's great being here. And thank you very much, Wendy and Libby, for having me here today.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Any final comments before we wrap up?
Nope.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll be sure we send the information through. Take care. Bye-bye.